Hello, I'm Jeremy Blain, and I will be taking you through the first half of this, and I'll introduce myself first, and then I will pass over to Robin, who I have to tell you over the last 2 weeks he's been in Singapore, Oman, Israel, and currently in Shanghai. Just had a day's training, and he's joining this webinar. So congratulations to that, Robin. Today, what we're going to do is that, and I'll bring you in a second as well. To introduce yourself formally, what we will both be doing is taking you through new research that we've done and the crucial how-to behind becoming a digital-driven business. And as David mentioned, the white paper behind this research is going to be available to you as we go through that. So I run a company called Performance Works, and my sense of being is all about preparing organizations, leaders and managers for the future, and particularly with focus on the next decade, where I feel a perfect storm of factors is coming in terms of change, from new generations joining the workforce, aging populations in some areas in the world, technology continuing at the pace, future of work, hashtag and all what that brings, and this age of transformation that we're in. Robin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. It's a pleasure to join you all. I've based out of Singapore for the last 25 years. And I run a company called Bridges, and Jeremy and I collaborate because my passion is around implementing strategies, very much from the organization and the C-suite perspective, and there's a natural collaboration of the work that we do together. I started the company at a time before implementation was really a key buzz, and even then, 20 years ago, I had people say, "What are you doing?" I used to have to say change management because nobody knew what it was. So I spent the first 5-10 years standing in my soapbox, helping people understand that you need the ability to craft a strategy and the skills to execute it. And fast forward to today, we work across 5 continents, working with governments and multinationals, helping them understand what it takes. And about 3 years ago, we pivoted towards digital execution. And about 80-90% of my time is spent helping organizations who are looking to embark on the digital journey. So it was a very natural partnership for Jeremy and I to do the research, and it's going to be a delight to share it. Just a little bit of background, originally from Scotland, but I've lived and worked in New York, London, Sydney, Hong Kong before settling in Singapore. Jeremy, back to you.
Thank you, Robin. I'm now going to turn off my video just so that we can save a bit of bandwidth as I take you through the first half. And what I'm going to do first is take you through our motivation for the research. Secondly, take you through the key points and headlines around that, but leave the bulk of this to Robin, which is the all-important how-to. When we entered this research, we realized that, a lot of this has been said and is in commentaries in boardrooms around the world, or so we thought at the moment, but there is precious little in terms of how do you actually do it. What does it mean in terms of digital transformation? How do people start it? How do you engage your human capital in that process, and how do you make it a success? That's where we've come at this up from, and that's where I'm going to start. Secondly, Robin will take you through the execution piece behind that, and we've developed a model behind that, which we will be delighted to launch to you today. And David will come back with some closing comments. Halfway, though, we'll stop, and I would just reinforce what David said. Please add questions to the questions box, and we'll attempt to answer any that come through as we're going along. So the first thing I want to start with, though, is a poll to engage everybody in this. And the poll that I'd like to ask you is, considering your own organizations, who is the hero in your organization championing transformation in your business currently? Is there one? Have a look at those answers. I'm going to launch the poll now. And you will be able to vote. So please vote on your screens. Great. So far we've got some heroes on the call already, which is great. interesting to see employees there and the leadership coming through. I'll try not to make this like a horse race commentary, but it's quite hard. So a fairly even split so far in terms of the responses coming in. A lot of us convinced that we're the ones that are going to lead this way. We're the heroes emerging, which is good, being that this is the week that Avengers Endgame is being launched, and we need heroes in our real organisations right now as well. So that looks like we're kind of about there. In fact, more now coming in around me. I'm the one doing this. Almost 6 out of 10 of you saying that actually I'm the hero here. I'm the one banging the drum about this. Robin, let me bring you in on this one. Anything that comes out on this one, because we've done this before a little bit, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think one of the discussions we've had just the other week is how critical HR's role is as a catalyst in digital transformation. It's very much, in the last few years, many HR directors are moving to a strategic perspective of the business. And of course, using technology, we've seen a lot of the back end of HR, from being able to predict who's going to leave to reading resumes, so the more admin tasks disappearing. And one of the things that Jeremy and I'd like to focus on during this presentation is how critical it is for the HR to recognize there's a whole new world of training, organizational development, and learning that needs to happen to move forward.
Great, thank you, Robin. Well, let me continue from here, because for me, what this also tells me is that, why isn't leadership higher in the organizations? Why aren't there heroes in our leadership team leading this? What about HR talent and L&D? There's a few questions that this raises rather than the answers that it gives. So perhaps we can answer that with a little bit of the research that we've done, and then the next steps following it. So let me introduce you to the world that we live in right now. We are at Industry 4.0. This is the fusion of that physical, digital, and biological. We're coping with technology running at a pace of change which is staggering. In fact, I think it was Justin Trudeau who said that the pace of change has never been quicker, but going forward it will be never as slow as this. And I think he's absolutely right. If you consider the smartphones that we're probably all using right now are barely 10 years old, and what has come in terms of business from that, and what businesses are on the top of the list globally at the moment, and how technology is weaving its way into every part of traditional business as well as the new opportunities coming out. This is why we have this big task at the moment. So, how are we handling digital transformation at the moment? And, this is an easy one for me, because Robin and I go into many organizations day to day, and this is generally what we see: a kind of perplexed look in the boardrooms that we visit, with lots of post-its on the wall, lots of ideas, but not much kind of road mapping around actually where we're going. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of we don't know what we don't know around this, and this is really at the heart of the problem. In 2016 and 17, interestingly, when we get a little bit more concrete around this, Forbes and IBM did some research and said, look, not only does traditional strategy fail over 60% of the time, but when we put digital strategy in place in this and ask that question, it is failing 84% of the time. Over 8 out of 10 times it's failing, which is a staggering amount. So, what it's telling us is that, it is almost the blind leading the blind here. We know we need to do this. Some organizations running faster than they can go, and failing and falling over because they're failing to see some of the blocks on the way, and probably failing to have the right vision in place. Year after this, in 2018, McKinsey did a further research and went a little bit deeper into this. And this I found interesting. The first point is that they found that, again, barely 20% of firms are leveraging digital technologies at all within their organizations. What they found was that they've been caught in this 10 years after the global financial crisis, There's a lot of short-termism in play, and it's been really difficult to bring the long-term back. So really the integration of technologies, which often comes with a big budget kind of tag to it as well, hasn't been actioned in many organizations. And in fact, those that have, only 15% of companies worldwide that is, actually have embedded and integrated technologies into their businesses worldwide, and the way they're doing business. And yet the pace of change is going to go ever quicker. And we're in a time of hyper competition where, every penny counts. And unfortunately, those organizations that are focused on the short term are going to be missing a trick over the next couple of years. Robin and I estimate that 2019 and 20 are really the last chances for many organizations to really get hold of what we're calling digital transformation right now. But McKinsey kind of went one step further here and said, well, look, of those that are embedding these technologies, is it having an impact on the business? And the answer was a resounding yes. In fact, in terms of revenue growth, 1 percentage point revenue growth in absolute terms, in terms of digital reinventing what they do as an organization and driving the business forward is a great result. However, it's even better when you consider EBITDA and almost 2% increase, 2 percentage points increase annually, and any organization would want that. So interestingly enough, in 2018, Robin and I sat down, and this whole research came about by us sharing a lunch and me saying, oh, I'm doing this piece of research this year. And Robin said, oh, that's funny. I'm doing something very similar about that. And by the end of lunch, we kind of agreed to join forces and move down this road together. And for us, when we were talking about it, we said, look, there's a lot of this been done before, but we're not sure that this research has covered all of the real issues. And we got talking, and we kind of put this journey, if you like, as akin to a road trip. We said there are component parts of that road trip which we need to cover in the research and in how digital transformation moving forward is implemented. So we looked at each component part. We looked at the road, first of all, and we looked at that and how that links to the organizational vision, if you like, the route that we're on, and are we anticipating the big potholes that are in the road, or do we see a bright kind of sunshine at the end of a great big long road that has got nothing in the way but birds tweeting and will be really successful? That's the first thing. Are we on the right road, and are we anticipating what the journey is going to be like? The second, have we got the right drivers in place? Are our leaders committed to this journey, and are they capable? Do they understand, and do they know what needs to happen, and can they lead it? When you add on to that as well, the engine that we have, that we're driving with, are we kind of using the engine that we've had in this car for 10, 20 years? There's in fact a great quote that I like here, which is, and I forget exactly who said it, but the sentiment is excellent. Said that if your organization is geared for success in the 20th century, you're going to fail in the 21st. So, and I believe that is absolutely the case. Is your engine and are your processes and systems ready and able for what was in the past and what your traditional company does, or is it ready for a new sleek future? So with that engine, in the engine, to Robin, to us, that is the whole organizational culture. The oil is the lubricant that makes sure that all parts of the engine works together, all functions working together, everybody aligned in the organization. Or are we fighting each other? Are we having to mend it and do lots of work on it just to kind of put sticky plasters on it all the time? And finally, what's the fuel mix looks like that we're putting into it? How are we enabling our organization? Is the fuel the right fuel? Are we using old fuels? Are we changing the organization to hybrid electric? Who knows? But this seems to be a great metaphor for us to start that process and to start looking at the different component parts of the research. So if I go forward, in 2019, therefore, 2 years after Forbes and IBM did their research and a year after McKinsey, we've come up with this research around becoming a digitally driven business, and with critical focus on how to do this and building a model behind it as well. So what I'm going to do now is just take you through the headlines of this, Though I would urge you at the end of this, when you get the link for the white paper itself, you can go into a little bit more detail. And of course, you can connect with Robin and myself on LinkedIn, and you can continue the discussion with us. So in terms of the research itself, this is a robust survey, almost 2,000 responders across 3 continents, and you can see the countries there. Interestingly enough, the split is North America, Europe, and of course Asia Pacific, splitting 64-40 roughly, the east to the west. And also within that isn't on this chart, around 63% of the responders are leadership level responders to this. The first thing that I would say, just to give you a snapshot of what we're seeing, is a very, very clear headline that Asia is rising. If you look at my kind of red, amber, green status map of what came out of the survey here, you can see that the accelerated performance is coming mainly from Asia Pacific here. And there is a real worry in Europe, which I'll also reinforce here. It seems to be falling behind, and there are reasons for that as well, which I will come to. While we're preparing this, I was reading an article last week from the Financial Times that really reinforced this, and this was their headline, as you see on the screen there. And it was a great article to demonstrate that. Now, Robin mentioned that he's been in Singapore for 20 years. I'm based now in the UK, but until the end of 2018, I was living and working in Singapore as well. And you witness really how that region is grabbing hold of these new ways of working in a way that they've been able to do perhaps much more efficiently than the traditional West organizations maybe, and I'll come to that point in a minute as well. But really, as a snapshot, this is where the competition is coming from. It is not just your traditional competitors in your industry environment. It's these countries and regions that are really making a huge stride forward and shifting the power base of the world today in business terms. In terms of our executive summary, on the back of that, when we look at why is this happening, the first key point that came out of 4 main points is that almost half of the leaders that we interviewed here are not prepared at all for digital transformation. And that's a real worry, because if your leadership in your organizations is not driving this, as it seems to be kind of pulling out in our poll as well, you know, we have you are doing a lot of the work, we have other people doing a lot of the work, but often our leadership and many organizations we visit as well aren't doing enough. The second point is that digital is leveling the competitive playing field. This is a key point about Asia rising, is that we're all starting at the same level. They're not going in the traditional journey that the West has gone anymore. They can leapfrog the traditional journey and leverage readily available technology to be right there and ready and compete on a level with the West. And this is where the Asia is accelerating. Why the West, and particularly Europe, is falling behind is a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, particularly across the Eurozone. And I don't have to mention, although I will mention it just once, I promise, Brexit. When you have things like Brexit and the Eurozone and all of that going on, you have a lack of confidence, you have a hold on budgets, you have a short-term focus, and it hinders digital transformation and long-term strategy. And this is where this is getting in the way. The quicker we move forward, the quicker we can get back on track, but it's a really worrying trend. And the fourth trend really for us is that alarm bells should be ringing a lot louder in the boardrooms across the world than they seem to be at the moment, because this starts at leadership level. So maybe I'll just go into our road trip analogy very quickly to headline the key parts of the research. The first is, you know, the road that we're on and the drivers that we have in our cars. And it all starts with the leadership in the organization, the visioning, the strategy, and the understanding, and critically the attitude. For us, this is a really big mentality piece at leadership level and at organizational level. First key piece of data, as I talked about before, is that only 40% of organizations surveyed have a digital vision or a vision ready for the digital era. They still have a traditional way of doing business, a traditional way of setting strategy and vision, and that is not good enough anymore, particularly in the hyper-competitive times we live in and the vastly shifting times of the 2020s ahead. Secondly, and more worryingly, and this really surprised Robin and myself, is that 40% of the leaders surveyed are not committed to adopting one. We've got too many other issues right now. We've got to protect our company. We've got too many other budget points. We've got old processes we need to fix. We've got these systems to put sticking plasters on. And we're very happy with our vision as stands right now. This to us is a very worrying point, because if you can't see the big shift coming in the next decade, then you're not fit to lead that organization moving forward. You've got 2 years maximum to get this visioning in place and starting to adopt and execute this to move forward. Thirdly, when we look at organizational level, almost half of all companies are not ready either. So never mind, they might not even have the vision and not committed to it, but they're not ready. They're just not geared for it. They're geared for 20th century success, not for 21st century success. So moving forward into the engine, let's have a look at our engine. Is our engine a flashy new hybrid engine? Is it an old diesel engine? Is it a wind-up engine? Who knows? But in terms of, if you like, this organization and the way that we're in, what this is all about is how do organizations leverage technology and the human touch around organizational culture and the way that we do business with our customers. This is the bit that is going to keep the car going. The lubricant inside that is the smooth process of how we work together internally, how we interact with our customers and move forward. The first piece of research that comes here is maybe a positive one we can pull out of this, and there weren't many, but maybe this is that 70% of those responding said, well, you know what, yes, we know we need to transform greater, but we just don't know what to do. And Robin and I have been to many leaders where they are actually now acknowledging this and saying, yes, we know we need to do this, but they're unable to step over this great kind of line into this chasm that they see in front of them. They just don't know what they don't know. So this immobilization at play at leadership level is infecting the rest of the organization. Company culture and transformation is a significant challenge for 6 out of 10 of the organizations that were surveyed here in this research. And it is culture transformation that Robin and I believe is at the heart of making this a success. And and for us now, when you consider this whole journey that we've painted, it isn't just this terminology around digital transformation. We believe it's whole business model transformation. And when you look at it that way, it is much more of a challenge, because it is every component part from the end to end from your business, the processes, the systems, the people, how we go to market, how we work, all of those kind of things. And the culture has to shift with that. And again, that starts with an attitude at leadership level, and then an engagement plan for how do we shape and shift the culture and bring people along with us. Because the interesting thing about our people is that they're ready. So 60% of our survey respondents saying, yes, our people are kind of asking us what's going on. They're asking us questions and they seem to be ready. But, from an HR and talent perspective, how long are those people going to stay? Are we going to attract new talent to those organizations if we don't have that vision for the future and clear roadmap to execute it? And what does that mean if we don't keep our talent and don't attract new ones? We're not going to survive. This is part of the engine of our business, which is driving us forward. And then finally, let's look at our fuel mix, which we believe is a 3-part fuel mix. And the first part of that is around the digital structure and digital way of working. So integration of the digital with a strongly human side to this is really what whole business transformation is about. I think one thing that we realize is that leaders that we interviewed are looking at digital transformation, and some of them said it's about a system or a thing or a piece of technology. That is not true at all. That's part of it only. It is as much about the human side of it as it is about the digital. But this component part, this digital part of it, is really important. Are our systems right for the future? Are they fit for purpose? Do we have a cyber risk policy in place? For example, many organizations that we interviewed, and many of you online potentially now, use WhatsApp in their organizations to try and collaborate better. And that's great because the spirit is there. But the risk of doing that is twofold. First of all, is that those leaders didn't realize by using WhatsApp that you have said yes to the terms and conditions which grant access to all of your data and contacts to Facebook, who own WhatsApp. The second is that it's open for hacking. And old systems from the 20th century aren't being kind of integrated, they're being fixed and upgraded rather than looked at root and branch, if you like, to think, are they fit for purpose? No, are they safe? By 2021, the cost of cyber crime will be around $6 trillion. That is why this is so important as part of our mix here. And then the way that we do business, the way that those best 15% of organizations that have integrated digital into their businesses are doing businesses is that they have used design thinking right through their organization, from employee level right up, to drive their processes and systems, problem solving, creative thinking and innovative thinking, to fast track processes and fast track things to market. So they're able to operate in a far more agile fashion. The second thing is the leverage of big data, and almost 6 out of 10 are not understanding how to leverage this. In fact, many organizations still have Excel spreadsheets that they analyze on a monthly basis based on the sales that are coming in. They're looking at it, they're trying to create PowerPoint slides from it. They're not integrating things like AI, artificial intelligence, in there. They're not integrating new ways of processing the data or displaying the data. So it's not just about the leverage of data, it's how we visualize data in a digitally enabled business. Because the visualization of data helps rapid decision making and helps rapid execution and helps the communication process and the engagement process and the motivation process of your employees, but also of your customers. So the leverage of big data is really, really important for competitive advantage also, because if you can get that data and start making those rapid changes within your industry ahead of your competition, then you're going to win. Think, for example, big data. Here's something that's coming that is in the news at the moment: 5G. This will be a game changer in terms of technology and big data. When we talked to some of the leaders that we interviewed around this, and when we said, what will 5G do for your business? We got, oh yeah, well, it'll be really rapid. We can watch videos, we can publish more videos now. We have great, download speeds for our thing. That really, this is just scratching the surface. There is a real misunderstanding of what this kind of rapid, hyper rapid data provision will give organizations. It can give competitive advantage for immediacy in terms of data analytics, data conclusions, and decision making on the go, which is why strategies are kind of moving from 5-year strategies to 3-year to 2-year to even 1-year strategy now, because things are changing so rapidly. Really, really key points. And finally, 45% of organizations are trying to change their organization with a new, still have an old model, a 20th century model. 55% of organizations are trying to make progress by thinking about, how do we integrate collaborative teams? They're thinking about sort of hashtag future of work and what that means to them in terms of, do we need to have more remote working? What does it mean in terms of how we manage our teams? What does a contingent workforce look like versus a permanent workforce in the future? What will the mix look like in the next 5 years? So from an HR, people, learning perspective, the huge amount of new skills that are needed by our leaders, managers, and teams to operate with 21st century organizational models, more collaborative tools, the use of technology, more remote working, and how we interact with data and with our customers is something that many organizations aren't thinking about. So I have finished my whirlwind tour into some parts of the research. So apologies if that felt like it's gone through a little bit quicker, but I wanted to leave room really for the how-to around this. But maybe this time, David, here for a pause for any questions that have come through, any that you've received privately as well.
Sure. And thanks very much for that, Jeremy. One question in from Richard. We've seen a lot of this research coming through in recent years. So why aren't leaders actually getting the message and doing something about it?
Robin, I think
Jeremy,
you like
you
this
take
question.
that one.
Okay. We both like this question. There are a few factors. First of all, with some leaders who are slightly more enlightened, there is an immobilization. We don't know what we don't know, and we need help. And that help is around, not just in terms of what that strategy looks like moving forward, but it's actually the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that they need to model for the future. So from an HR leadership point of view, I would also say from an HR perspective and a learning perspective, that organization needs to flow up the line to show those leaders what they need and bring and enable those, that kind of skill building into the boardroom. The second, which is a really disturbing one for us, is that there was an apathy about this. In some parts of the world, even some leaders kind of feeding back, well, it's not my problem, it's the next generation's problem. I've got retirement on the case, they can do it better than me, so I'm going to just let them run with it. But, when I retire, that was a disturbing one in some regions. And that apathy is key. And then the third one is a wrapping around old ways of doing business. So in some of the medium to larger organizations, which are the more traditional organizations, we saw leaders who are just mired in the past. They're working with old processes and systems. Their thinking is more short term because they're looking at shareholder value. They're looking at kind of the competition at the moment. They've just come out of the global financial crisis and they need to build their kind of core results before they can do something. But this is kind of, preparing to fail in the long term while you're just kind of sticking plasters over the problem in the short term. So for many leaders, the many leaders who are enlightened around this are modeling this. They are walking the walk as well as talking the talk. They're pace setting for the rest of the organization and being seen to say and do things differently so that they're bringing the rest of the organization on. The problem is with those other leaders is the rest of the organization is saying, well, why should we change if they're not changing? They might be saying we're going to do this or we need to do this, but nothing's actually happening. Anything to add, Robin?
No, you covered it.
Excellent. And gentlemen, got one other question I'd like to bring up at this stage, and we've got a couple more, but we'll leave them towards the end. I think I want to be sensitive to giving Robin the time we said we would. Question from John, and it might be why leadership aren't taking those changes. What are some of the main risks and potential pitfalls of transforming into a digital business? I guess if we're thinking it's more of a risk or a pitfall, are we less likely to make those changes?
Jeremy, can I pick that one up?
Yeah, you certainly can.
So great question, and it's two-pronged. First of all, as Jeremy shared, 84% of digital executions are failing. So the odds are stacked against you before you even start. But more importantly, to put it very succinctly, you have no choice. Digital is not an option. We're in the middle of the Industrial Revolution 4.0. The internet started it. Then we moved into mobile, then IoT, and today it's very much around AI and augmented reality. So the pace, if you don't change, you're going to get left behind and be out of business very quickly. And this is why also we're seeing company life cycles shorten so dramatically. It's a double-edged sword. It's tough to do and to get it right, but you have no choice but to step up and do it. But as I'll explain in a few minutes, how you do that and the speed you do it is what varies.
Yeah, and maybe I could just add to that is that it just kind of compounds the issue when, many organizations are suffering in terms of their sort of short-term results as well. And they're coping with this pace of change of technologies and actually how they need to shape their organizations for the future when you consider things like robotic process automation, RPA, or human design centers, thinking about kind of how our human capital interacts with this brand new kind of digital centered organization that we're trying to build. It's huge questions, which is why we're saying that it's not just about digital transformation, it's considering the whole. And that's where, and that in some ways it's no surprise, and that's where many organizations are failing. But we have a way forward. And Robin, I have control of the slides for you here. So I will kind of click these forward for you as you go through, because I'm not sure whether you have them, yes or not. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I have visual now, but I don't. Okay. So ironically, I'm talking to you from Shanghai today, and I just shared one. I was just working with 50 CEOs in China, and one of the trends I shared was that 98% of people now access the internet through mobile. And on the setup we have, I only have the picture, so I have that. Thanks.
Okay, so
David, can I check? How long do I have?
We have about
David,
20 minutes. We have about 20 minutes of the original time, Robin.
Okay, wonderful. So basically, this is my second TED Talk of the day, because I also just gave a TED Talk at lunchtime during a conference here. So I'll make it short and sharp, and here we go. So Jeremy has focused that from our research, there were a few shockers, especially that so few leaders have digital transformation on their agenda. And this scared the bejeebers out of us, because we are based, Jeremy was in Asia at the time. He's only just gone back to the UK. And we were seeing the speed around us of which everything is moving. So if we can go to the next slide. There we go. So from the research and from our exposure and experience over the last 3-4 years working with multinationals and governments, we analyzed what did the research mean. And we had the conversation that it's great to have research, but so what? So my side of the presentation is, what does it mean to you? Next slide. One very important message. This is not a digital transformation. It's a whole business model transformation. You have to think about not just tweaking or adjusting the way you operate. It's completely changing the culture, the DNA of your organization. What's the impact for HR? It means you must have a seat at the table. You have to be looking and involved and participating in the transformation, because it changes the culture, and that's critical for the HR perspective. Warren Buffett put it very succinctly: in a chronically leaking boat, energy devoted to changing vessels is more productive than energy devoted to patching leaks. It's not about fixing the leaks, it's about completely changing the culture and the DNA of your business. Next. So we discovered from the research and our work, there were 3 broad areas of the strategy that you need to consider to adopt digital. The first one is you've got to be thinking about the future. Jeremy mentioned it could be 10 years, it could be as short as 1 year, but you've got to start looking at what's involved. Secondly, you then need centricity around 3 key areas: the customer, the culture, and the operations. All 3 components need to come together with a very strong laser beam focus. And the final broad strategic area is, once you put this in place, you have to sustain the strategy by future-proofing, by tracking, by measuring it, by reinforcing it to your board. So with the 3 broad areas, we then said, well, that's not going to help people, so we needed to go deeper. And what I'm going to share with you with my time is the 11 steps that it takes to adopt a digital execution. And you can see on the diagram that 1 and 2 are referring to future thinking. So the first thing you need to do is establish a digital vision. Now, just to give you a live example, I was working with 2 different banks. One is DBS in Singapore, who have a digital vision to make banking joyful. In other words, no pain, easy to do, transform the whole organization. Excuse me. We had another client come in from the Middle East, another bank, whose digital vision was to make account opening automated. Two very different visions. One was aggressive, the other wasn't. One transformed the business, the other didn't. So you need to translate what does digital mean to the way you'll run and structure your business, but more importantly, how you'll offer it to the customer. In the second one, developing the leadership digital mindset, leaders need to go back to school. They need to be comfortable with the language. From an HR point of view, you have to start educating your people. They need to know what agile means, IoT, AI, prescriptive analytics. This language has to become second nature in the way they work. In step 3, we look at the restructuring for a digital first culture. Jeremy already mentioned data is critical. You have to use data to run your business. There's a saying we use, if it moves, measure it. If it doesn't move, eat it. Everything that moves in the business has to be measured. Today, we can do it easier, less expense, more manageable. But then you've got to train your people how to use the data. You've got to start hiring people outside who can translate the data for you and align them with the business. Step 4, learn to experiment and co-create. Many of you may have heard the expression, fail early, fail fast, fail forward. As you move to a more agile with a customer and operation-centric model, you build a culture that allows people to delve deeply into what customers want and then go back and start to make it happen in their own world. So they experiment, they throw out, they test it. If it doesn't work, they start again and they get rewarded for failing. Step 5, you've got to adopt design thinking for agile. The first step of design thinking, and the biggest step, takes 60-70% of your time, is understanding really what your customer wants. And it's not about doing a survey, it's about visiting your customers, seeing how they use your products and services, watching their emotions as you ask questions, and then not just bringing back hard facts, but sharing the passion, the emotion, the stress that your customers are facing. Then you go on to develop and design and test new ways of working. In step 6, once you have the skills to do design thinking, you can now look end to end at your customer journey. You can really focus now on restructuring the business, not about selling a product, but running a platform. The difference is when your platform, it's like mini businesses coming together so that they deliver the customer solution. Companies like Hire in China, the DBS Bank in Singapore are restructuring where they no longer have silos or business verticals. They go across the business using platforms. Number 7, building architecture and evolve ecosystems. Of course, the technology has to support, and this initially is where the major investment is. You have to move forward from your legacy systems. You also then have to start looking at using APIs, application program interface. Today in Asia and leading tech companies around the world, everyone is talking about open API. What does it do? It allows you to connect your company technology with another supplier so that you offer a seamless experience to your customers. And ecosystems are rapidly what most people in 2019 are talking about. While you're doing all this internally, you have to recognize that it's empowering your employees. You can no longer dictate the strategy. You have to give the direction, which is why the vision is so critical, and then empower your people. At the same time, you must also be aware to protect your customer. In the UK, recently you had the British Airways issue. You've had other companies around the world who have had their systems hacked and data stolen. Customer protection is critical, especially when you consider it takes 474 days before anyone even notices their system is hacked. So you have to build your customer trust in from the beginning as a part of your strategy. And then finally, you have to future-proof. Again, this will be a new skill that HR needs to drive across the business. You need to train your people how to use data visualization. The mind understands visuals 60,000 times faster than text. So today, with all the data available, we now have to train our people to be able to understand what all this data means and translate it into customer solutions. And step 11, you have to measure it. You need new measures. We're not talking about number of Facebook likes or number of sign-ons or number of eyeballs. We're talking about what is the value of digital to your organization. So, for example, DBS discovered when they started tracking digital that digital customers were worth double what a traditional customer was. In other words, they made double the amount of profit from customers who used digital. So these are the 11 steps that we pulled together. The next question is, how many of the 11 are we good at today? And when you look at it, we discovered that leaders are only good at the gray area. 8 out of the 11 are new skills, new learning, new abilities that the leadership and the company need. And this is why HR must have a seat at the table. You have to be part of that cultural and educational transformation to set your people up for success. Next slide. So I presented the company and I presented the 11 steps, and I have 2 last messages in the time I have with you. The first one is, I had an awakening when I realized that companies work at different speeds. I was working with the Cisco Technologies leadership team in London from across Europe, and for 2 days they were saying, Robin, everything is urgent. We have to get it done tomorrow. We need to move. We need it done today. The next day, I flew to Thailand to one of my clients, who's the CEO of an agricultural company, and they provide seeds to farmers. When I was talking about him about digital, he said, Robin, it's okay. We'll get there. There's no rush. And this is when I had the aha reckoning that you need a sense of urgency, but not every company works at the same speed. So some companies go slow, some go medium, and some must work at a high speed. And the next image will show you how that comes together. So you can see now the sense of urgency on the left and the speed at the bottom. And different industries work at different speeds. So agricultural work very slow. Luxury retail are able to work slowly. So for example, I work with the Louis Vuitton group, LVMH. There's no threat that anyone's going to steal their market share in any time tomorrow. They have time to get digital transformation right, to share the same experience in the store as you do online, and look at omnipresence. Whereas you go to the other extreme, banking, as you know, telcos, and technology, they have a high sense of urgency and must be working at a high speed. And the question for yourself when you talk to your colleagues in the C-suite is, what is the right speed for our digital transformation? How aggressive do we need to be in the market? And moving forward, On the next slide, a quick summary from Piyush, the CEO of DBS Bank, who just won the best bank in the world. If you want to compete, you must embrace technology, which means not just technology, but the culture, the risk, the willingness to experiment, being nimble, focused on the customer, data-driven, and absolutely obsessed with your customer. But remember, not easy to do. 84% are failing for many of the reasons we've highlighted. And moving forward, what we're seeing with the work we're doing in America, Europe, and Asia is now the spotlight is shifting. Already, for example, nobody talks about disruption anymore. That word became obsolete in the end of 2017. Even the word digital is becoming obsolete into 2019. Today, the key word is ecosystem. The language moves very quickly, and the spotlight is shifting now to how do you execute your digital. And the final image I'll share with you is something that we call in Bridges the implementation compass. The compass highlights the 8 areas for excellence in execution. So not only do you need 11 steps to adopt digital transformation, you need another 8 to be successful to execute it. And this is why it's so tough to achieve success. Next slide. Okay. So, Jeremy, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Some sober food for thought, I think, for some there, but a great opportunity as well. And, you know, when Robin and I were going through this and building this model, it just reinforced itself how important this is and how complicated it can be, and therefore the need for something like this, because it is not just those 11 steps, it's the how, it's the what and the how together, which is going to be lead to success. And this is why I would reinforce what Robin said, is that human capital leaders and learning leaders need to take a seat at the table, need to drive this agenda and look at where the opportunities are for the business. First of all, in the transformational kind of language that they are, what are the digitization opportunities that we have to enable us to work and be much more efficient as an organization? How can we leverage data so we know the type of people who will be interested in our business, which staff may leave, and there is technology out there that can do that right now that you're looking into your businesses with. Transforming to the digital driven organization, how are we educating our people? What is our strategy? What are the new knowledge, skills, behaviors that we need to model and that we need to be seen to model? What do our customers expect? How are they evolving? How are we mapping our human capital with their expertise internally in their businesses, but also, as Robin said, how are we linking our technologies so that we're communicating much more effectively and able to strategically partner going forward to make decisions much more quicker. And of course, as we then move into the next decade and new ways of working start to infiltrate our businesses, we may be working with more contingent workforces, more remotely. What are the new skills that are needed at leadership management level so that we can manage, motivate, guide, coach, and drive for performance through our people, whoever they are, whether they are contingent workforce, whether they're permanent workforce or other. So there is a strong human capital opportunity here as well, but it is a major challenge if we don't have a seat at the table as human capital leaders, and that's why it is becoming so important from that.
Jeremy, can I add one thing?
Oh yes, of course.
Jeremy, can you go back one step? Thanks. So one other critical thing that as an HR you're going to be asked, which is, am I going to lose my job? It's a question I speak at a lot of digital conferences. In fact, Jeremy and I are presenting around Europe about 3 or 4 times over the next 4 months. If you want something in the UK, we're going to be there. I'm going to be over there to join Jeremy about 4 times in the next 4 months. So the critical question comes up: am I going to lose my job? The short answer is potentially yes. the jobs are changing. It's an industrial revolution. But technology is replacing tasks, not people. And it's not about a technology revolution. It's about technology plus people revolution. And people's jobs are changing. So the challenge is you need to retrain your people. But I'll leave you on one very positive note. There's a trend coming out now from the companies, the 16% who successfully execute digital, that within 2 years, they're increasing their workforce by 15 to 20% because they're winning more market share, winning more deals, growing the business, creating more opportunities. So in the short term, yes, there's a pain. In the long term, when you're successful, you're hiring more people, 15 to 20% within the next 2 years than you were in the past.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks. So we have a few things to help you with. Robin, as you may know, has done a lot of work in terms of the strategy implementation element, as he was talking about. So digital execution is becoming important. He has a couple of books there, and this white paper that we have made kind of gone into a little bit more detail into the research, but also expanded on the modeling at the back end. And of course, we are available also for an ongoing discussion around this. So before I hand over to David, on behalf of us both, I'd like to say thank you for joining us on the webinar today. Please connect with us on LinkedIn, continue the discussion. I'm sure that you'll have similar challenges. We can help. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
And
Robin, Jeremy.
China.
Thank you both very much. Very enlightening in terms of looking at it. Reminds me of the quotation from Didier Bonnet, Senior VP of Capgemini. The only wrong move when it comes to digital transformation is not to make any move at all.
Yeah.
You know, great to actually see and great to actually see some of the practical steps. We've got a couple of questions I want to just pick up on. And Zorab asked a question initially, what would be the first step to actually take based on your current learnings? And of course, the ticking clock model is really, I guess, the first step. But his follow-up question to that is, how should one even start to come up with a digital vision?
So when you start to look at a digital vision, you start with the customer. You look at what is happening outside, not inside your business. You want to know, what are your customers looking for? What is the market shifting towards? Where are the opportunities? So from a strategic perspective, the old models of a SWOT or a PEST or 5 forces are often not used in a digital vision. A digital vision is about creating a new opportunity. And it's very much about storytelling and emotional, and it's a very different approach to visioning than people have done in the past or towards strategy. But it's a great question. And to start to look at the digital vision, start with your customers, not where they are today, but what they want for tomorrow. Then start to think about what that translates and there's no barriers. You have to be completely open to what can be potentially done, because if you don't do it, the competition will.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and if I can just say, if that is my good friend Zohrab from Malaysia, thank you very much for joining us. A big hello to you. I'd say if you do what Robin is saying there, is you're not just proving what the benefits are and what you need to do moving forward, but you're actually articulating at leadership level the cost of not doing something. And that really will make the biggest difference to me in terms of the argumentation behind it as well. So it's as much doing what Robin said as then being prepared to being prepared with a solid argument about the benefits, the downsides, etc., and how you're going to drive that forward, because they have to start listening now. David.
Excellent. Great stuff. Final question from John. I'm conscious that we are pretty much pushing our time here. One pushback that I often hear is, but we're not Google. We don't need to be. What approaches have you seen working in convincing CEOs and other leadership of the imperative of digital transformation?
Robin, over to you.
Okay, so I mentioned this right at the beginning. Digital is not an option. It's the air that we breathe today. Just think back 18 years when the internet was all the rage. It wasn't an option. But now we fast forward into a digital world and you have to adopt digital. But adopting digital has different impacts on different businesses. Like the Cisco example from London and the agricultural seed farmers in Thailand. You have to translate through the digital vision what it's going to mean to your business and then and look at the sense of urgency and the speed for transformation. But the first thing is not an option. You have to start transforming your business. The only question is how fast and to what extent.
Yeah, and
Excellent.
I think just by working with some of the organisations that I'm working with, a kind of a major company that I'm working with in France right now, very big organisation, huge success coming out of the 20th century, really aware and struggling with the transformation right now. It is not just one thing that does this as well from in the technology terms. It is how those threads all work together and what they're doing. And the problem with this organization is you've got different functions looking at different technologies without talking to different functions, to other functions, so that everything talks together. It relates very, very much to what Robin talked about before. So while it's a strong need to go forward in this, it has to be integrated and consistent across the organization with tools and tech that talk to each other, that enable the organization and don't overwhelm it and start putting all of these things in place that we have at the moment, which is causing many of the problems and actually much of the resistance, which is coming to do something different.
Excellent. So with Jeremy, Robin, thank you very, very much. A very up-to-the-moment conversation for us to actually have in terms of transforming your company into a digital-driven business. And I'm sure their audience are very grateful in terms of the narrative, the actual research, and most importantly, that white paper and the practical steps that they can take. So from my perspective, in terms of ATD's UK member network, I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this session. I'm sure you found it informative. If you are still planning on actually attending the ATD conference taking place in Washington next month, and you have not already got your ticket for that, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you along with the rest of the delegation. But for that and with that right now, I'd like to thank Jeremy and Robin for taking us through the session. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, David.